Welcome to this shared dungeon mode tutorial, the new standard way to play Dungeons & Feelings. In this exciting game variation, all players will occupy the same dungeon, competing for resources, rooms, and treasure in a heated race to acquire victory points. You will have many items at your disposal to conquer the dungeon, but to craft them, you will need to ask your fellow players to open up, dig deep, and answer a question about themselves. Laugh, cry, and start a deeper conversation with your friends in Dungeons & Feelings. To begin, each player chooses from one of the 6 characters: the Knight, Barbarian, Dwarf, Elf, Sorceress, and Wizard, and places the corresponding character sheet in front of them. Next, each player will then place a level token on the 1 and a health token on the 6 on their character sheet. Separate the square room cards, excluding the Start and Dragon rooms, resource cards, and treasure cards into their own piles and shuffle each deck. Create small stacks of each resource type, including wood, metal, glass, grain, and magic, of about 15 cards each. The exact number isn't important. Take the rest of the resource cards and shuffle them together into one larger deck. From this larger randomized deck of resources, turn over cards equal to the number of players plus 1. So in a 4-person game, turn over 5 cards. These become communal resources. Take one of each type of resource per player. So for example, in a 4-player game, take 4 wood, 4 metal, 4 glass, 4 magic, and 4 grain, and shuffle together into a starter deck. This will be used to create each player's starting hand. Next, give each player the following: their respective character token and a character stand, 1 dragon room card, indicated by a skull on the back, 2 item tokens, place 1 on the magic mirror and 1 on the bomb. For easy mode, or to cater to new players, also give an item for the ammo that corresponds to the player's starting weapon. For the knight and dwarf, that's an energy potion. For the elf and orc, that's an arrow. And for the sorceress and wizard, that's a mana potion. Give each player 1 key to be placed on the character sheet in the key box, 2, 1, or 0 treasure cards corresponding to easy, medium, or hard modes, respectively. Remember, different players can play at different difficulty levels depending on experience. We recommend starting on medium mode or 1 treasure card to start. And then 5 random resource cards from the starter deck that we created during setup. Next, it's time to create the dungeon. First, lay down a start room card indicated by the S on the back. Next, reveal 3 random room cards and add them to that start room card or to each other according to the rules laid out in the Building Your Dungeon section. Repeat this process for the number of players in the game. So for example, in a 3-person game, you should have 3 start room cards and 9 random room cards connected together to form a dungeon. Don't overthink the initial dungeon setup, it should be randomized. Remember to add any applicable bonus XP to the dungeon as laid out in the Experience and Leveling Up section. Remove any unused start room cards and dragon cards from the game. Next, turn over the top 3 treasure cards and place them face up in the center of the playing area. Then, roll a dice to see who goes first. Give the dealer token to this player. Next, players choose which start room to place their character in reverse turn order. In other words, the player with the dealer token chooses where to place their character last. You are now ready to play Dungeons & Feelings. A game of Dungeons & Feelings is broken up into several phases. Each phase follows the same basic structure. First, give each player 2 random room cards. Starting with the player with the dealer token and moving clockwise, add 1 room to the dungeon at a time, going around twice in total. Then, the player with the dealer token starts their turn. They may choose from one of 3 primary actions. 1, they may draw resource cards from the communal card pool. 2, they may craft. Or 3, they may proceed through the dungeon, resolving the action in the rooms they enter. A player may also perform an unlimited number of secondary actions during their turn, regardless of the primary action they chose. And then, after each player has had 3 turns, the phase ends and the dealer token is given to the next player going clockwise. Remember to discard unclaimed resource cards in the communal pool and place new ones out equal to the number of players in the game plus 1. The winner of the game is determined by who is the first to accumulate 6 victory points. Victory points are awarded based on the following, which can also be found on the bottom of each character sheet. The following are worth 1 victory point each. Collecting a set of weapons. The player must have 1 melee type, 1 magic type, and 1 ranged type weapon. This can include the starter weapon. Weapons can be of any level so long as the player is able to equip it. Collect a set of accessories. This includes an amulet, a boom band, and a guild ring. Gain the most XP. This includes all XP gained over the course of the game, including those traded in when leveling up. The player who has accumulated the most XP is in constant possession of this victory point until someone accumulates more. If 2 players are tied, the player who got that total first has the victory point. Only when their total is passed will a new person get this victory point. Feel free to place a green checkmark navigation token over this victory point on your character sheet to signify you have this victory point. Please note that any XP traded in to unresolve a room does not count towards this victory point. In addition, there are miscellaneous victory points that can be earned within the dungeon itself, from the bounty hunter room, as well as by defeating the Cyclops. Place a green checkmark token over the miscellaneous victory points section of your character sheet to keep track of these. The following are worth 2 victory points each. Collect a set of armor. This includes a helm, armor, boots, and gloves of any level, so long as the player can equip it. Armor that has been destroyed in battle still counts towards this total. Trade each color gem. This includes at least 1 each of red, green, and blue gems. Gems must be traded in a merchant room, not simply acquired from the treasure deck. Use 4 or more counters. This includes using at least 4 of the torch, strength spell, speed boots, grappling hook, and shield to counter a trap. And finally, 2 victory points are awarded to anyone who slays their dragon. Please note, there are 2 additional victory points on the character sheet, 1 for building a rectangular map and 1 for connecting the most portals. These are used in the individual dungeon mode and are not applicable for the shared dungeon mode. We will now look at the primary and secondary actions in more detail. A player may perform 1 primary action during their turn. These include 1. Drawing resources. A player may draw 2 resources from the communal card pool. If there is only 1 resource available, they may only take that one. Once the face-up resources have been depleted, this action is not available until the next phase begins and the communal resource cards are replenished. The number of resources replenished each phase should be equal to the number of players plus 1. So in a 3-player game, 4 resource cards will be replenished, and in a 4-player game, 5 resource cards will be replenished. Draw these from the large stack of random resources. The second option is that players may craft. A player may craft as many items during a turn as they'd like, provided they have the requisite resource cards. See the section on crafting for more information about how this works. And the third option is that players may navigate the dungeon. A player may move 3 spaces and resolve the action in any room they pass, if applicable. See additional details in the Navigating the Dungeon section. Secondary actions. A player may perform as many secondary actions during their turn as they would like, in addition to the primary action they chose. Secondary actions include things like managing inventory and treasure, exchanging a gem for a resource, exchanging 2 treasure cards for 1 new treasure, equipping armor, leveling up, and using items like the grappling hook. Rooms are added to the dungeon at the beginning of each phase, with the exception of the dragon card, which can be added at any time during your turn. In order to do so, the room cards must share an open passage, locked door, or empty wall on the sides they are touching. The exception to this rule is the dragon card, which may be placed anywhere. Also, room cards can be rotated to fit as needed. In this example, the adjoining rooms share an open passage, making this a valid extension to your dungeon. In this example, one room has an open passage while the adjoining room has a locked door, making this an invalid extension to your dungeon. In shared dungeon mode, certain players are able to remove rooms from the dungeon. In a 3-player game, the dealer may remove one room before they add their first room only, while in a 4-player game, the first 2 players may remove a room before adding in their first room. In order to qualify for removal, the room must meet the following criteria. All actions in the room must be fully resolved. There must not be any players in that room, and it must not be a warp room. Also, a room that is surrounded by 4 other rooms can only be removed if the player can then place a room in that spot. On the first turn, no rooms will be removed because no rooms have been resolved. Players who can remove a room must remove one if it is possible to do so. You may also replace existing rooms so long as the existing room meets the following criteria. 1. It must be fully resolved. 2. It cannot be currently occupied by another player. 3rd, it cannot be a warp room. And 4th, the room you are swapping in must fit in that space according to the bordering walls of the dungeon. If replacing a room, do not add bonus XP to that room as you normally would when constructing the dungeon. However, if that room is bordered on all 4 sides, you are awarded a bonus. You may get another room to add to the dungeon. Players can only utilize this extra room bonus once per phase. Players may move up to 3 rooms during a turn. However, there are several items and room types that improve a player's navigation abilities, including the speed boots, which allow movement up to 5 rooms, the magic mirror, which allows teleportation to any room in their dungeon, and warp rooms, which allow movement between other warp rooms. Please note, though, that traveling between warp rooms does not count towards a player's movement limit. If a player wishes to travel through a wall, they may use a bomb, one of which is provided at game setup. Locked doors can be passed through by using a key. Players receive 1 key to start out, but more can be found by completing trap rooms. When the action has been resolved in a room, place a navigation token over the room's action symbols at the bottom of the card. These are the tokens with the green check marks. If the player has entered a room but did not resolve the action there, for example, they didn't open a treasure chest, place a navigation token elsewhere on the card, not over the action symbols at the bottom. A player may still freely return to this room, but this signifies the room can still be resolved at a later time. The player can now return to this room from any direction, even if they didn't necessarily unlock all the doors of this room or destroy all the walls. In other words, if there is a navigation token in a room, you can enter it as if there was an open passage there. It doesn't matter who resolved that room initially, any player can now freely enter it from any side. For rooms with 2 functions, such as the blacksmith and warp rooms, place a navigation token over each function when they are complete. The 2 functions can be completed separately. Please note, if a player does not have a key or bomb but wishes to use one, they may sacrifice 1 HP in lieu of a key or bomb at any time. Players can travel to the opposite side of the dungeon if the wall types match. Any spaces in that row or column are skipped over. Go to the furthest room in that row or column. Normal navigation rules apply. If there is a wall or door, it will require a bomb or key respectively. And if the room you are traveling to has a green check mark, it can be entered freely without a bomb or a key. Rooms may also be unresolved by discarding 4 XP. This is performed while navigating the dungeon. A player may unresolve any room their character is bordering. Remove the green checkmark token to signify this. The action can once again be resolved. So for example, treasure can be reopened or monsters can be fought again. No bonus XP is added to a room that has been unresolved. In order to use items, they must first be crafted. Each recipe requires 2 resources and generally yields 2 items, the exception being health potions. Items may be crafted if the player chooses crafting as their primary action that turn, and there is no limit to the amount of crafting they may do. If a player begins their turn with 7 or more resources, they must craft. A player may also exchange 3 resources of the same type for 1 of any other resource at any time. Crafting is where the feelings in Dungeons & Feelings come into play. On each resource card is a word or phrase. When crafting, you must think of a personal question to ask a fellow player that loosely ties together the 2 concepts on each card. Roll a dice to determine the recipient of your question. In a 3-player game, if you were to roll a 1, 2, or 3, you would ask the question to the player on your left. If you roll a 4, 5, or 6, you would ask the player on your right. In a 4-player game, if you were to roll a 1 or 2, you would ask the player on your left. If you roll a 3 or a 4, you would ask the player across from you. And if you rolled a 5 or a 6, you would ask the player to your right. If other players would rather not share or don't have a good answer, that's totally fine. Remember, the point is to have fun. Then, place the appropriate number of item tokens in the inventory section of your character sheet for later use. After asking the question, the player who answers may take a resource card of the same type as one used in that recipe. Draw a resource from its respective deck, not from the communal resources available face up. Keep resources acquired from feelings separate from your normal actively available resources. These resources are considered inactive. Turn them sideways and place them under your character sheet to signify this. Once a player acquires 2 resource cards of the same type via sharing feelings, they can add one of them to their actively available resources and discard the other. Place the used resources on the bottom of their respective decks. If 2 players occupy the same room, they may do one special joint item crafting, even outside of the crafting phase. The 2 players decide on what to craft and each contributes 1 resource. Each player will then take only 1 item token instead of the usual 2, including health potions. They will jointly come up with a question. In a 3-player game, the recipient of the question will always be the 3rd player, while in a 4-player game, roll a dice. 1 through 3, ask the person to your left, and a 4 through 6, ask the person on your right. The recipient gets an inactive resource card as usual. Most room cards provide action symbols to convey the purpose of that room. Refer to the table on your character sheet for reading these various symbols. Most commonly, rooms have items listed that may be exchanged for other things. A red outline around the action symbols indicates a dangerous room that must be resolved immediately upon entry. Please note, if you use an item to counter a trap, place that token over the item icon on your character sheet. Using 4 trap counters results in 2 victory points. In this example, we counter the trap room with a grappling hook and are rewarded 1 key and 2 experience. Place these tokens in their respective sections on your character sheet. All rooms can only be resolved once. A room can only be resolved again if it is unresolved by expending 4 XP, as we discussed previously. As always, when a room is resolved, place a navigation token over the action symbols in that room. Monster rooms work a bit differently from other room types. When a player enters a room with a monster, combat begins immediately. Combat works in turn-based fashion. First, the player attacks. This is dependent on having the proper ammo for the weapon you have. So for example, mana, energy, or arrows correspond to magic, melee, or ranged weapons respectively. You must discard the item token of the mana, energy, or arrow in order to attack. Any weapon in a player's possession is in play during combat, so long as they meet the weapon's level requirement. The damage done will be printed on the weapon card. Subtract that damage from the monster's HP, indicated in the top right of the monster card. Use your character token to keep track of the monster's health. If a player does not have any ammo, they can attack unarmed, which is good for 1 damage. However, the monster will attack first. A player can only fight unarmed if they don't have any ammo or bombs. After the player attacks, it is the monster's turn. The monster will do damage equal to the number in the top left of the monster card next to the sword icon. Subtract this damage from the player's HP. Use a health token to keep track of character HP on the character sheet. If a player falls to 0 HP, they are dead and out of the game. If a player has armor equipped, the monster's damage will apply to the armor's defense before the player's HP. Turn the armor sideways to indicate it has been damaged, and flip upside down and remove from your mat to indicate it has been destroyed. If the armor takes 1 damage, rotate it to the left. If armor takes 2 damage, rotate it to the right, and then remove and flip if it has been destroyed. Now that the monster has finished attacking, it is our turn to attack. Although we no longer have any ammo items for our weapons, we do have a bomb, which can be used in combat for 1 damage. The monster now has 0 HP. When the monster is defeated, the player will receive all the items at the bottom of the card. In this case, 1 skull and 2 XP. The only way to restore damaged or destroyed armor is by going into a blacksmith room. Flip the armor right side up and place it back on your character sheet. Please note, players can flee from combat at any time, but they must go through at least 1 round of combat upon entering a room with a monster. You may go through as many or as few rounds of combat during a turn as you would like. Treasure cards contain weapons, armor, gems, and other items helpful to make characters more powerful. Unlike regular items that are discarded after use, most treasure cards are permanent upgrades. There should always be 3 treasure cards face up available to choose. However, players can also choose to take treasure from the top of the deck. If a treasure is taken from those face up, immediately replace it. Only 1 type of each armor or weapon can be equipped. So for example, a player cannot have 2 separate helms equipped. Please note, the boom band, guild ring, and amulet are equipped under accessories as seen here. If you exchange a gem in a merchant room, place it in the traded gems section of your character sheet. Remember, trading all 3 colored gems results in 2 victory points. Please note, if a treasure is discarded, place it on the bottom of the deck. Additionally, at any point during a player's turn, they may exchange 2 treasure cards for 1 new treasure card. This is considered a secondary action and can be performed at any point during your turn, regardless of the primary action you chose. We will now go over the various types of rooms. Resource rooms. Immediately upon adding resource rooms to the dungeon, place 3 resource tokens over the resource bundles labeled 1, 2, and 3. Upon entry into these rooms, take 1 XP as well as 1 resource card of that type indicated by the icon in the corner. Remove a resource token from that card to signify this. Any player may then pass through a resource room and take a resource of that type at a later point, but only the first person who enters it may take the XP. Remember, draw resource cards from its respective deck, not from the community resource cards. Trap rooms. These are the most common room types in the game. Trap rooms are one of the few rooms that must be resolved immediately upon entering, as designated by the red outline on the action symbols. In this trap room, you must discard a torch or lose an HP to receive 2 XP and a key. If the player does not have the corresponding item to counter a trap, they must lose an HP. Armor does not count towards defending a trap. HP are lost directly. After resolving a trap room, take 2 XP and a key. Make sure to place used trap counters on your player mat over the respective icon. Monster rooms. Please refer to the section Monsters and Combat on how monster rooms work. Along with trap rooms, monster rooms must be resolved immediately. Treasure rooms. Players may use a key to receive 2 treasure cards. You can take them from the top of the deck or from those showing face up, or a combination of both. Immediately replace a face-up treasure if it is selected. Remember, a player may trade HP for a key at any time. Warp rooms. Players can transport from one warp room to another. Each connected warp room yields an XP. To connect warps, simply travel between them. Warping does not count towards the movement limit during a turn. Warp rooms have a secondary function in that you may trade one resource of any type for another resource of a different type. These two functions are independent from one another. Remember, warp rooms may never be removed from the dungeon or replaced. Blacksmith room. The blacksmith has 2 unique functions which are independent of one another. First, players can exchange a treasure card in their possession for a treasure card on top of the deck or among those showing face up. If the player chooses a card from the top of the deck, place the card you're exchanging at the bottom of the deck. Please note, players cannot exchange traded gems. And second, the blacksmith will also repair damaged armor free of charge. The bounty room. You may exchange 2 skulls for a victory point. Merchant room. Exchange a gem of the specified color for 2 treasures and 1 XP. When a gem is exchanged, place it on the character sheet. If the player has a guild ring, they may exchange any color gem with any merchant, not just the color they are requesting. However, to earn victory points, the player must still exchange each of the 3 color gems, regardless of what the merchant originally requested. Items are obtained from crafting. Each item is one-time use. Discard the token after using. Some items have dual uses, often to counter a trap or perform another function. An item can only be used for one of these functions at a time, not both. There is no limit to the number of items a player can use during their turn. Let's review the various items. Energy potions, mana potions, and arrows are the ammo needed to use melee, magic, and ranged weapons, respectively. Discard an item token to use these weapons for 1 hit in battle. Damage is listed on the weapon card. If the player has an amulet and meets the level requirement, energy, mana, and arrows can be used for any type of weapon. The next 5 items, the shield, torch, grappling hook, speed boots, and strength spell, can be used to counter traps in the dungeon. If you counter a trap, place that item token over its respective symbol on the left side of your character sheet. Remember, if you use 4 unique counters, you will earn 2 victory points. In addition to countering traps, these 5 items have a secondary use. Shield reflects a monster's next and only next attack back against them, and the player receives 1 damage in recoil. Let's look at a specific example. Instead of using an energy potion, I'm going to use a shield. First, discard the shield item token. Think of it like holding the shield up to deflect the monster's attack. So when the monster goes to attack, it will bounce off the shield and hit him instead. Effectively, a shield is used in lieu of a regular attack. Thus, the 2 damage the spider was going to do to me are instead redirected at him. I then take 1 damage in recoil. Torch. When using a treasure card, you may use a torch to look through the deck and choose any card. The torch can only be used for 1 treasure at a time. Grappling hook. Immediately take the dealer token at the phase's end. Remember, a phase ends once all players have completed 3 turns, just before a new round of room cards are added. If the player already has the dealer token when a grappling hook is used, they will simply keep it another turn. If multiple players use a grappling hook, the last player to do so would become the new dealer. Speed boots. Move up to 5 spaces during a turn instead of the typical 3. Strength spell. Increases attack damage by 1 during the duration of the next battle. This buff lasts for every attack during the next battle. Once the battle is over, attack damage will then return to normal. Strength spells cannot be stacked. Bomb can be used to travel through walls or used in battle for 1 damage. If a player has a boom band, bombs do a total of 3 damage. Boom bands do not stack. Magic Mirror allows the player to travel to any room within their dungeon. This does count towards the 3 room per turn limit. In shared dungeon mode, where the dungeon will get quite large by the game's end, magic mirrors are essential. Health Potion heals 1 HP. Please note that players cannot have more than 6 HP. Resolving various room types yields XP. To level up to level 2 and 3, you must discard 6 XP and 1 skull. However, to reach level 4, you must discard 6 XP plus 2 skulls. Place accrued XP in the XP square on your character sheet. Players can then trade in this XP as well as skulls, which are received from fighting monsters, to level up. Reaching levels 2 and 3 is required to equip better armor and weapons, while reaching level 4 is required to fight the dragon. XP also has another function in that a player may exchange 4 XP to unresolve a room and be able to once again access its contents, as we discussed previously. This is an important note. Players can earn bonus XP by placing room cards against multiple adjacent walls. For every wall beyond 1 that a room touches upon placing it, put 1 additional bonus XP token in that room. Then, when the player resolves the action in that room, they will take their normal XP plus the bonus XP left inside that room. This only applies to rooms that normally give XP. This bonus does not apply when replacing a currently existing room or when unresolving a room. Also remember, bonus XP should still be applied even during initial dungeon setup. Dragons are the final boss of Dungeons & Feelings. Dragon rooms can be added to the dungeon at any time during a player's turn, but can only be entered once the player reaches level 4. The Dragon Room card can border any wall type and can be entered from any side without the use of a key or bomb. Defeating a dragon is worth 2 victory points. In shared dungeon mode, the game still continues after someone defeats their dragon, assuming this did not give that player 6 victory points. We hope you enjoyed this tutorial video. For detailed written instructions as well as gameplay variations, please visit dungeonsandfeelings.com. Please leave a comment to let us know if you have any questions. Thank you for watching.